Paying little or no tax in retirement sounds like a dream. And over the years, I've seen lots of retirees plan to do exactly that in their early retirement years. Whether they're living off cash savings, a severance package from work, or just pulling from their tax-free savings account, they end up paying little or no tax at all in those first few years. And while that sounds amazing, it's actually one of the biggest tax mistakes you can make. And for many retirees, it can mean paying over $100,000 more in taxes than you need to over the course of your retirement. So in this video, I'm going to jump into our planning software and show you how paying little or no tax early in retirement can create a massive tax bomb later in life, and what you can do to avoid it. So I want to run through two scenarios. One, where we have zero tax bill for the first 5 years of retirement. So this is someone that pays absolutely zero tax to CRA for the first 5 years of retirement. Like I said, it sounds great. Then I'm going to build a plan that you should probably be following if you want to pay less tax. And although optically, yes, you're paying a little bit more tax early in retirement, you're left off with paying much less tax overall. And I'll show you even early on in retirement, you're going to be better off. So on the surface, it looks better. Underneath the hood, not quite the same thing. So here we have Mark and Molly, and Mark and Molly both have RSPs, TFSAs, and they have this joint cash accounts. They recently got an inheritance. They have $250,000 sitting in cash. So RSPs, they each have 400,000 RSPs and 150,000 in the TFSA account. So the same assets for both of them, but that cash injection made them think like, why don't we live off this early in retirement and avoid drawing down on our RSPs? So if we look at Mark's scenario here, and Molly's going to be the same, you can see the RSP under the financial assets, they've decided for the first 5 years not to touch them. So there's no money going in, there's no money coming out. That cash, that non-registered amount that they have from the inheritance, they're pulling down on that essentially as quickly as possible. And then when that runs out, they're going to live off their tax-free savings account. And the whole concept here is, let's avoid paying tax for really as long as possible. Now at age 65, we'll turn on the kind of pension plan, CPP, old age security, OAS, as well as start the RSP or the RIF withdrawal at that point. And like most of you watching this video, they're going to convert their RSP to RIF and just draw the minimum amount out. And you can see here that starts to create a bit of a tax due, but again, that first 5 years, you can see under the total tax, it's absolutely zero. So when we look at their combined view for both Molly and Mark, you can see the first 5 years, zero tax. At age 65, the tax bill is about $6,300, and it increases over time. Eventually gets quite expensive, $17,000 in some years, and drops back down to a bit all over the place. And that's one of the issues that we have here, and I'll touch on this more shortly. But you can see here, if we look at Mark or Molly's effective or average tax rate, it's 0% for the 5 years, then floats around 7%, jumps up to 11%, and then back down to 7%. And I've said it many times before, and I'll say it many times again. You do not want a roller coaster ride with your tax bill in retirement. You want your tax bill to be as level as possible, typically within 2 to 3% average tax rate. So the average amount of tax you're paying, you want it to be within about, ideally 1 or 2, 2 to 3%. You don't want this where it's 0 all the way up to 11%. Like that's too big of a spread. So that's one of the big issues. And people always ask like, Adam, I have a plan from my bank or financial institution. How do I know if it's good or not? Well, a good starting point is look at your average tax rate throughout the life of your plan. And is it fairly level? Again, 2 to 3% consistently until life expectancy or until your RSPs have been depleted. That's assuming they've been depleted, which if you have a plan from your bank, they probably aren't even depleted at that point. So you want a very level tax bill. Again, a level tax bill doesn't mean you have a great plan. That's just step one of kind of checking if yours is even remotely on track. Now we'll do a full comparison here in a minute with the second scenario I've created, but I want to show a few other gaps in this plan. So you can see the TFSA is fully depleted by age 68, 69. So again, there's very little to no flexibility in this plan beyond age 68. If they have an emergency, if they need some more money, the only account they have is their RSP account at that point. And then the other thing is their RSP is funded all the way to age 90, life expectancy in this case. So if they died at age, say 85 even, they have about $150,000 left in RSPs, and that would be taxed at a higher tax rate. So again, there's no proper drawdown strategy to this. So again, paying zero tax early is the key issue, but it also, because they've depleted these other accounts that create some flexibility, It's created a very strict plan, not the cash flow type of plan that you want as you walk through retirement to have that flexibility. So when creating a plan for any client, our goal is to maximize the after-tax income in your pocket. But we also want to look at some of these side things like flexibility. Like if you have an emergency later in life, is there money there not only to just pay for that emergency, but to pay it in a tax efficient manner? If you pass away early, is your estate structured in a proper way, or is your spouse or loved one taken care of? Like there's a lot of peripheral things that you need to look at in a plan. But in this case, that first scenario, tax rate, and I'll show you this here in a second in a comparison, but you end up paying a lot more taxes. The estate is not in a great situation and the flexibility is not there. It's not a great plan, and if one of them had passed away, it leaves them in a really tough spot as well. So it's not checking off a lot of boxes. Now, if we make some quick changes here, which I'll highlight, it creates a lot more flexibility. It's a better plan, and I'll show you here, it allows them to pay a whole lot less tax now and on their estate at death. So you can see here, we're looking at Mark. Molly's gonna be the same thing. Instead of not touching the RSPs for the first 5 years, we're actually gonna start drawing it down, and we're drawing about $30,000 a year. The way it worked out for tax purposes, right through the plan until the money's depleted, which is about age 80. So we're basically depleting the RSP from now to age 80. You can see we are touching or supplementing income with that cash or the non-registered account. So there is money coming out of there, and we're not touching the tax-free savings account till age 67. Now, I do want to highlight a couple things here. I haven't done a full-blown plan here. At the end of the day, I would probably delay CPP, but I wanted to compare just a very basic apples to apples comparison and not make a lot of changes here. But obviously CPP, we want to look at what is the optimal timing here. Also that cash, that non-registered, we want to be topping up the TFSAs every year as long as we could as well. I haven't done that in here because that's not the purpose of this video, but that would optimize it that much more going forward. So as we look at a combined view here, you'll see under the total tax here, you can see from year one, we're paying about $6,000. Scales down a little bit. At age 65, it bumps up. Again, the amount of tax we're paying bumps up, but the average tax rate stays very level because of all of the tax credits, which I've done a video on recently. If you haven't checked that out, check that out. We'll link that above here. But you can see here the total tax, and if we look at Mark, you can see his average tax rate stays very level. And so you can see, it stays between about high 7s, so it dips down to high 7s later in life, up to about 9%. So it's within that 2 to 3% range that we're looking. It's also within single digits. And a lot of you were like, Adam, how do I pay single digit tax? A lot of you will. And again, this isn't on a very nice income in retirement. Combined, they're pulling in $100,000 after tax adjusted to inflation, paying single digit tax rate. And that we see across the board quite often. So single digit, low double digit for a couple, very common with a very nice income. Now you can see here some other side benefits. You can see the TFSA account is actually very well funded through their lifetime. So if they have that emergency, there's a lot of money sitting there all the way to age 90. In fact, there's a balance at age 90 just in case they need something. So very well funded TFSA, that leaves them in a much better position. The other thing is their RSP, you can see, is depleted by age 80. So if they were to pass away at age 80, they're in a good spot. They're able to, avoid the tax bill on their estate. So let's look at direct comparison between the two scenarios. So looking at the comparison tool, I want to compare a multitude of ages because you guys will always have a comment below, yeah, well, what about this age? So the first one I want to compare, and you'll see in the top right, it's from age 60 to 64. So what happens if both clients passed away at age 64? The left's number one, that is the zero tax in the first 5 years. Number two is a bit of tax planning, which is the way you should be going. You can see lifetime personal tax is $0 versus $28,000. Well, that's a big difference. But when you pass away, you'd have $424,000 of estate tax at death versus $273,000 if you had done the proper planning. And so yes, you've saved $28,000 in taxes, but after tax, your estate would have $118,000 less had you run the zero tax plan. So again, if we take the 118 minus the 28 off there, we're still $90,000 ahead, and that's at age 64. So for all of you thinking like, Adam, yeah, this will make sense down the road because you can manipulate it. Well, here's the thing. At age 64, 4 years into retirement, you paid zero tax thinking, well, I'm deferring everything else. It's growing tax deferred. It's going to be better off. You're almost $100,000, $90,000 difference in 4 years from not doing proper planning. That's a massive, massive difference. But what happens if you do live a little bit longer? So at age 70, again, the zero tax up front, we're saving on taxes, only $62,000 versus $91,000 had we drawn down the RIF account. We're paying more tax. But you can see the difference in estate at death is $213,000 more had you started drawing out of your RSP at age 60 versus waiting to 65. So if we take the 213 minus the 29, again, we're almost $200,000 more in your pocket after tax. And again, remember, they're drawing the same income. So the income in their pocket to live off, to enjoy retirement is all the same. We're just looking at taxes paid and estate after tax. So in this scenario, for the first 10 years of retirement, they lived, they had $100,000 a year, they're enjoying retirement, and boom, they pass away. Their estate has almost $200,000 more. So they enjoyed retirement the same, they just restructure stuff a little bit differently with how they were drawing it down and have way more money in their estate for their kids, grandkids, charities, whoever they want to leave their money to. If we look at age 75, well, by age 75, we've actually paid less tax doing the RSP meltdown. So $141,000 versus $150,000. And we have much more in the estate. So a double win. So the 184, you'd add on the 8,900, we're close to $200,000 of savings still. So that savings still keeps racking up and it stays around that number through the lifetime. So we can see if we grab age 80, again, there's almost a $13,000 tax savings, $161,000 more in the estate. So this is where this planning tool works really well. If we run it all the way till 90, we can see the difference. $105,000 less taxes paid plus $112,000 more in the estate. So over $200,000 difference just by doing a little bit of planning. So for all of you that are sitting there with a severance, an inheritance, just cash, and you're thinking, you know what, I would rather pay zero tax than pay any tax at all. Well, for most of you, and I did not cherry pick this scenario, let me tell you, we run across this again and again and again. And every single time it's going to make sense to do proper tax planning around the drawdown of your accounts to make sure that you're actually paying the less amount of tax. Again, what looks like the best option on paper isn't always the best under the hood. And as you look at estate planning and longevity and the types of assets that you have, there's a lot of money movement here. And you can see consistently, even after the 4 years, there's a $90,000 difference. So you pay more tax up front on the planning, but overall, if you passed away, you had the same money after tax to enjoy and much more to your estate. So there's a lot that goes into your retirement plan that you need to be aware of, but make sure that you don't have zero tax years, at least until your RSPs are withdrawn later in life. Early in retirement, you need to create a bit of a tax bill. We live in a progressive tax system. That means as you earn more, you pay more percentage of tax. Because we're in a progressive tax system, you need to have a level average tax rate. That's where a lot of efficiency comes out of. So as you walk into retirement, take a look at where your income's coming from, how much tax you're paying, and how you need to structure. Because as you can see from a simple example like this, it can be a big difference. And like I talked about earlier, to even compound this even further to give you more benefit, you'd want to look at delaying your CPP, a full RSP meltdown. There's a lot more planning that can be done in a scenario like this. And if you want to learn more about an RSP meltdown, how that works and how it can benefit you in retirement, check out this video.